This is Josie's story, written by her daughters, Julie, Debbie and Cathy, as presented at her funeral service. Josie was the first child of Emily Eliza and Charles Wilfred Baker. She was born in Port Augusta on November 23, 1930. It was almost 6 years later that brother John was born, and youngest brother Jim came along 2 years after that. During these years, Josie formed a very close bond with her mother, which lasted until Nana's death in 1997. Pop was a mechanic, and the family moved gradually citywards as he found work in country towns like Crystal Brook and Snowtown. Josie started her schooling at Crystal Brook, and by 1939 the family came to the city, with their first home being on Irish Harp Road, now Regency Road, with Josie attending Blair Athol Primary School. In 1941 they moved to the beach and lived on the Strand at Largs. Uncle Jim says that Jose was given the job of yelling for the boys at dinner time when they were playing cricket among the sandhills, possibly future training for Brownie leadership and motherhood. She went to Largs Bay Primary School and met Margaret Hughes, now Robertson. They went to Guides and Port Tech together and have stayed the greatest of friends ever since. Mum always kept a diary until her memory started to fail her. We still have them all, and we will always treasure them. The contents are not earth-shattering, embarrassing, or worth publishing, but they contain precious glimpses of her life which can only be appreciated by those she was closest to. During her time at West Beach Residential Care, we loved reading snippets to her. Sometimes she remembered the stories, sometimes not, but she always loved the fact that we were enjoying them with her. The first diary was from 1945, when she was still at high school and a sea ranger. Her time was filled with adventures like camps and hikes, and also helping with brownies. One of the major events during her ranger years was the National Ranger Camp at Yarralumla in Canberra with Margaret and Molly Giles. They even had their photograph in the newspaper, looking gorgeous in their uniforms. Then there was the great bike trek to Clare. The photographs have them looking very glamorous in shorts or other suitable bike riding attire of the era. We understand that boyfriends were on the agenda by this time, and that enabled some mechanical support from time to time. Dawn Miller, now Fenwick, was another great friend Mum met during ranger years. Josie's working life began at 1946 at age 15. Her first job was at Simpson & Sons. After a year or so there, she then worked at ICI for 4 years and made many more friendships. The diaries also show that Mum often bought lengths of material to sew dresses. Each weekend there were dances, parties, trips to the pictures, bike rides to visit friends, and meeting up with friends at the beach. Much time had to be spent preparing for the special events, days of cutting out patterns and sewing. It was also during her ranger years that Josie met Mr. Wright, or Mr. Purches as he appears in the earliest diary entry. Jack Purches was the rover leader at Semaphore Scout Group, quite a lot older than Mum, but he really turned out to be a good catch. There were many Guide Scout related dates at first, then they began going to jazz concerts together, and Josie began meeting Jack's friends outside of scouting. Coincidentally, the day of Josie's funeral, that is, 7th of April, was exactly 60 years from the day they became engaged. They married on April 5, 1952 at Stowe Church in the city. They lived at the Purchase family home in Hargrave Street, Semaphore, and Mum stayed there until 2000, when she decided to move to a retirement village on Delphin Island. She enjoyed great friendships with her Hargrave Street neighbours, particularly the Clarks, the Wellings, the Mitchells and the Baronis. Julie was born in May 1953 and Debbie in July 1955. Cathy came along a little later in May 1961, and the family was complete. Mum relished her role as a mother and wanted her girls to enjoy as many pursuits as possible, especially those which she had regretted not doing herself: netball, swimming, piano lessons, dancing, and of course guiding. Josie made us lots of lovely dresses and beautiful birthday cakes over the years, and she always loved surprising us on birthdays and Christmas with novel ways for us to discover what our gifts were. Nothing was too much trouble for Mum. She loved driving us and any number of friends or teammates to training and carnivals, camps, meetings, music lessons and Sunday school. Her cars were usually station wagons, and in the days before seatbelts, her record was 14 girls packed into the car for a guiding event. Those cars were Josie's workhorses. She adored travelling around the city and countryside with her family, or taking her mother for a trip to Port Augusta, as she often did in Nana's later years. During the summer, Mum would get us out of bed at 5:30 a.m. for our swimming lessons. We started out in the Port River by the Jervois Bridge. When it was cold, the parents would sit in their cars with blankets, and when it was warmer, they'd sit on chairs on the edge of the wharf and watch us swim between the barges. In those days, the river was quite a busy waterway, so we'd be swimming through oil patches and floating muck. It was some years later that the Ethelton swimming pool was built, and then we enjoyed our swimming days in more civilised circumstances. Joyce was always such an energetic, busy woman. She was heavily involved in guiding, a brown owl at the Largs Brownie Pack for over 25 years, and then a ranger leader with her old ranger group, First Birkenhead. Again, many friendships were forged during these years, particularly with her tawny owl, Judy Whitehorn, who has become a good friend to all of us. She was also very busy with church events at St. Bede's Semaphore, being a member of the Guild, Mothers Union, participating in flower and morning tea rosters, and running the White Elephant stall each year at the fete. In later years she joined the Baden-Powell Guild, Friendship Club, Probus Club, and volunteered at the Semaphore Seagulls Senior Group. Mum's ambition for the three of us was that we all get good secretarial jobs, so we were all sent to business college for at least part of our high school years. Thanks, Mum, we did all get good jobs, and even though Deb switched to nursing, she is still the best typist in the medical practice. Mum was keen for us to travel. During our primary school years, she organised several family holidays within Australia. Dad was happy for her to make all the arrangements, although he never seemed too keen on travel until we were actually underway. And then he had to admit that Mum had done well and he would enjoy himself. In 1969, Mum was able to arrange the trip of a lifetime for the family. We spent 6 months travelling around the world by ship and visiting the most exciting places in USA, Canada, Britain and Europe. Dad's cousin, dear Auntie Eve Fettis, came too. Mum arranged tours, car hire, apartment rental, hotels, a guide camp in Switzerland for Deb and Julie, stage shows in London, and she even organised afternoon tea with Lady Baden-Powell. She also had to give Cathy her school lessons during this time. How lucky we were to have a mum who would take the bull by the horns and get things done. Dad called her the organiser, sometimes out of frustration at how many things she would try to fit into our lives, but ultimately he would have to admit that he was impressed with her skills and grateful that he could leave the arrangements to her. In 1972, Mum encouraged Julie to take a job in Papua New Guinea. What an incredible thing to do, and how well it turned out for Julie. She met Jim Powell there and they married in 1975. Dad died in 1976 after a year suffering from motor neurone disease. This left Mum widowed at the age of 46. She was working at Lefevre High School as a library assistant at that time, a job she truly loved. In fact, she said she enjoyed it so much she could have worked there for free. We are sure that her job helped her cope with losing Dad. She made many new friends during that time. Betty Levars travelled to Europe with Jose, and Margaret Gibson has been a regular lunch partner since the 70s. She began travelling with some of these friends who helped her after Dad passed away, and during the late 70s, 80s and 90s she must have gone over 100 trips, both near and far. Canada with Margaret Robertson and Polly Stern, Europe with Claire Gifford and again with Betty Lavars, India, China, Zimbabwe and South Africa, Egypt and Kenya and Israel with Cathy, trips within Australia and overseas with Maurice Foll, who was her friend and companion for many years after Dad died, and many trips around Australia, including the Strzelecki track and a huge driving trip up to Darwin and on to Western Australia with Margaret and George Robertson. There were many interstate trips with the JIM friends, from Dad's 1957 Scout Jamboree trip to Europe. There were Baden-Powell Guild trips and several cruises with Aileen Salmon and another with Morris. Her last trip was with Polly Stern, cruises to Mexico and Alaska. She really did love to travel. During the 80s, Debbie married David Stern and Cathy married Chris Wilkinson. Mum loved her 3 sons-in-law dearly and was very proud of the way they have looked after her daughters and grandsons. Within a few years, Joyce had 7 grandsons, Chris and Nathan Powell, Alex, Sam and Jack Stern, and Shay and Ryan Wilkinson, now all fine young men. Chris married Sarah just 2 weeks ago, and Mum was thrilled to be able to attend their lovely wedding in beautiful weather at Carrick Hill. Mum always found time to help out in any way she could with the grandsons. Babysitting, swimming lessons, school holiday sleepovers, picking up from school or kindy, the annual holiday to Port Elliot for some or all of the family. Sometimes the holiday cottage was packed to the hilt with Josie, 7 grandsons and their mothers. Mum was always happy to shout a day at Green Hills or a trip on the cockle train or a pub meal or 2. When reading the diaries during the early 90s, it is amazing to realise how often she drove up to Cherry Gardens, down to Beverley and then to North Haven to pick up, drop off, babysit, iron, cook, etc., etc. You can see from these stories that Mum was a most generous soul with her time, talents and money. She has always felt very fortunate that she never wanted for anything, so she was keen to support lots of charities, sponsor several World Vision children over the years, and if friends needed assistance, she was only too willing to help in any way she could. We are all sure her family and friends have been touched by her generosity at some time. Apart from the demise of those closest to her, the biggest tragedy in Mum's life was her loss of memory. We were all saddened when she could no longer drive her car or live independently. We were very happy that she was able to live with Deb for a few years in the granny flat. She felt safe and comfortable there, and she loved having the dogs to make a fuss off when no one was home. There was usually someone about though, with uni students and part-time workers always coming and going. Lots of Scrabble games were played, and she enjoyed drives with Deb and sitting in the car while Deb shopped. She must have gone through hundreds of crossword puzzles during those years. Last November we celebrated her 80th birthday along with family and friends. It was a wonderful day, and we all saw how Mum enjoyed catching up with everyone and being the centre of attention. When the decision was made to find a nursing home for Mum, we were determined to find the nicest place possible, and amazingly West Beach residential care became available at the right time. It seemed such a blessing then, and it has proved to be right till the end. The staff could not have been more caring to Mum and to us as well, especially during her last few days. We were so impressed with the fantastic care she was given. We felt blessed too that we were able to spend many hours keeping Mum company and supporting each other in her room in the days before she died. We knew she was comfortable and peaceful and being very well looked after. We could not have hoped for more than that. Our best memories of Mum will always be of a loving, fun, energetic, adventurous and determined person, and we will treasure these memories forever.